Hi there. I would like to go over something quite philosophical, in my view, about openings in general. And it comes about from Tarash's Knight Before Bishops. I believe Tarash might have mentioned this as one of his kind of general rules for beginners, Knights Before Bishops. It's interesting to see what philosophies are behind that idea. And I have an example, even from my own pet Knight c3, which I'll get to as well to check out. But first, let's look at e4, e5. There is actually a weird and wacky move, bishop b5. Now, the bishop is a target, and sometimes black can play c6. So, also there's a move bishop c4, and this is the bishop's opening. But generally, white plays knight f3. And, okay, this is the most successful move generally, rather than bishop c4. And if knight c6, then, given that there's a target on c6, bishop b5 is an example. Or you could play the Italian game with bishop c4. So you've got Roy Lopez's Spanish game, or you've got the Italian game with bishop c4. But the knight's been deployed to f3. And you might think, okay, knights before bishops. But what is the actual philosophy going on here? And why is that actually important when we study openings or try and play systems in reverse or try and imitate or improvise? I think there is a core principle. And for me, the most attractive way of looking at it, and I thought about this over a few days, is to say the most essential moves first and the kind of esoteric moves later. So knight f3 is a kind of more essential move at this moment than bishop c4. It also, because there's a target already on e5, it is limiting to the opponent's options. So it's keeping one's own options open and also kind of restricting the opponent's options. It's a higher priority right now. It's more core, more central right now, based on the information we have, than a more esoteric move like bishop c4 or bishop c5. And I'm not trying to be patronizing about this. I've been thinking about this quite a bit recently, because it relates to a game of Opposen I saw, where he's actually playing my favorite Tango system, but he plays it slightly different to me, and I hate to say this, he might be playing it in a more accurate manner than I've been playing it. So if we relate this to the Dunst opening, which Opposen has been playing recently, he's basically said somewhere that he's like using this d4 knight f6, the Mexican defense, in reverse. Yeah, so both knights are out and about, and knight f6 waits for c4. If you played knight c6 first, then sometimes that's not as good. This kind of Shigurin system, white could, for example, play knight f3, and knowing that the knight's kind of blocked in the c-pawn, there's the information there, and white could play in all sorts of ways which are really annoying, like not using c4. So the fun for me of the Tango with black is to play knight f6 first and c4 and then knight c6. But if it's against e4, then fine, because I want a dark square strategy, d4, e5. And Tony Moles has had good results with this position. I'm not going to g6. But let's have a look at this in reverse then and try and apply this principle of most essential first and esoteric later. Because esoteric can be made slightly more effective if you have a little bit more information later. Opposen's treatment is knight c3, the Dunst, d5. Now I immediately go for e4, which does give black some options here, like d takes e4 is pretty annoying. In fact, after e4, d5 Scandinavian, if you play knight c3 again, d takes e4 is pretty annoying. I don't think white can really write home about such a huge advantage here. But if we stick to that kind of philosophy of most essential first, this is wasn't against Abe Crux Alba in a Daily Bullet a few days back. So I was really amazed that, wasn't playing knight c3, and I'm going to study his games along with other notable, one knight c3 players, because I want to enhance my knowledge of this. But he actually plays knight f3. So this is kind of interesting, because if d4 now, knight e4, we have a pawn on d4, so we can work around that pawn and keep it under pressure, and maybe commit further dark square commitments to work with our bishop later. So this is a very, very interesting treatment. And you see here, after knight c6, knight g3, there is a dark square commitment. And now, and it's interesting that e4, the bishop, has more information about the position. So the more esoteric decision can actually be based on more information, which will make it slightly more effective now. In fact, the bishop doesn't have to, there's another option, the bishop doesn't have to go to c4 or b, it can actually go to b5. In fact, after knight f6, Opposen now chooses bishop b5. So the core philosophy here is, perhaps you could argue it's maximum flexibility, but when building, for example, software systems, I mean, the way Chess World, my correspondence site is built, the core features had to be in there, being able to plan move and legal move validation. You start with core, and then esoteric can become, later, like knockouts can be, a few months or years later, you can think about all the different weird and wonderful tournament formats. So even, if you look at software, core moves come first. So it's kind of acknowledged in the popularity of opening theory. I mean, the most vivid example, just to recap, let's go back. After e4, e5, this is the most vivid example of core first, esoteric later. A bishop move is slightly more esoteric. The immediate core, if you definitely know you're going to play knight f3, but sometimes there are perks to delaying it, because you might want to play f4 later, so there is a case for knight c3 and delaying it. Okay. Anyway, let's go back. Sorry for that detour. Let's go back to this game. So we have the bishop committing to b5, and Opposen with this move order has essentially avoided, for sure, the d takes, knight takes, e4 lines. He's got a kind of dreamy Tango position where black, in fact, can be inflicted structural damage, and he did inflict structural damage, and he plays d3, so he's removed his kind of potentially bad piece. And this is a nice position to play from. h3, bishop e6, white castles h6, knight d2, c5. Now, I think this might be a slight inaccuracy if you check with engines. He played knight c4 immediately. Maybe it's a slight inaccuracy. The engines suggest b3 here, with the option of playing, the extra option added of b takes is interesting, and white should have a very interesting, advantage, because now there's f4 on the cards. It's a very pleasant looking position. There's knight f5. So anyway, maybe this was a slight inaccuracy. So black took, we have bishop e7, now f4, but this is a great position now. After knight f5, we have g6. If black had castled, queen d3, knight d7, queen g3, queen f6, this position is fairly nice for white. For example, knight takes h6, we're hitting the queen. We can see it's dangerous for black anyway. But in the game, after knight f5, black played g6, and now Opposen just took on d6, c takes, and now f takes d, e5, d takes, and now just queen f3, and black actually resigns. So this is an 18 move win. It's faster than most of my Tango wins with knight c3, and it does show that for some reason I'd been against this knight f3. I'm kind of keen to sort of tempt black to gain space with this move, yeah, but it doesn't limit the opponent's options, this immediate thing. So you could argue this is slightly more non-essential, slightly more esoteric, you could argue, than the more essential move that you might want to play anyway. knight f3. And it's so only after, if you get d4, then it's delightful. You've just bypassed the whole d takes knight e4. So this is the Tango without that sort of downside. You've bypassed that downside move order by essentially prioritizing the core system moves first, and then delayed the more esoteric moves based on more information available. So, e4 then becomes kind of safer to play in this situation. You'd assume that maybe, d takes is slightly off-putting because it's giving this semi-open f file maybe, which could be played with later. So it's slightly less tempting to do that. And then we've got our light square game, or even this doubling pawns game. So usually I'd be happy with bishop on c4. So I do find, if you do look at the move orders of IMs and GMs playing what seems to be the same openings as you'll see perhaps, like I've seen, some subtle difference in move orders. And I'll treat it as an exercise maybe, and please let me know in the comments if this is a useful exercise, to see, does their move order close down extra options compared to your move order? I mean, it's certainly the case here. This is a big awakening, this move order, because, why would you want this d takes? And you don't mind d4, and you've stopped e5, and here, actually, on this situation, maybe it is more tempting to play e4 here, given that there's a c5 target. It might be more palatable there anyway. So it's very, very interesting that even an opening I've considered my pet, I have to acknowledge that there is scope for improvement of opening move orders. And for me, I just wanted to impart that, for me personally, I don't know about you guys, instead of that philosophy of maximum flexibility or keeping your options open, closing down the opponents, I personally prefer the idea, maybe as a software developer, you develop the core systems first, esoteric later, based on more information, because it might not even be needed later. You might find those esoteric bits of a system might not even be needed, or there's more effective things based on a changing context. So in chess terms, the essential moves are often the knight moves in the opening, because quite often it's pretty non-controversial to discourage e5. But there is a certain level, basically, of controversy with e4. So by prioritizing core moves first, esoteric later, you're reducing that potential scope for controversy, in my view. So I know this is a little bit of a really kind of philosophical video, and you might think I'm just talking about nothing. That's fine, but I thought I should get it out there just in case some of you find it interesting and useful to think about, maybe tweaking your move orders slightly based on this principle of core first and kind of more optional esoteric stuff later. So something to think about. A nice crushing quick win from Opposen. And I might show you another example of this knight c3 system in action by Opposen, as it helps me, of course, as well, as I like this knight c3 system. It's currently a current favourite. Last year I was favouriting b3, but I like knight c3 at the moment. And this does seem to be, also coincidentally, he knows that the Mexican is effective, and the Mexican is 2 knight moves, so he's mirroring that in reverse. Then it starts with 2 knight moves. And you don't mind d5, because knight e5 actually is good results for black if you look it up on the chess databases. That's actually good results. So the 2 knight moves are kind of core, pretty non-controversial. So if you do those first, it does make a lot of sense. Okay, I hope my points have been made clear enough. But please let me know if, maybe in the comments, if you want further clarification. I just think this could be, in theory, a stronger move than e4 because of this continuation here, d takes. I have tried to justify this with, sometimes a gambit, but we're getting into murky territories here with d3. Anyway, my move order, which I'm going to gravitate to, I think will be on Opposen's knight f3. With that philosophy, core first, esoteric later. Comments, questions, like, shares, subscribes, all appreciated. This is kind of mentioned in my opening course recently, which is not on one of those links below. But if you go to Kingscrusher TV/openings or Kingscrusher TV/openings-special for the next few days, there's even super discount. I'll put that in the pinned comment and the description of this video, though, because that is one of the kind of top 11 rules that I put in the openings course about this idea of prioritizing core moves first, esoteric later, maximum flexibility principle. Okay, thanks very much.